It was unnervingly still, as Ellen sat alone in her dimly lit room. A strange unease settled over her, a whisper of something unseen stirring in the air. She called out, not in fear, but in longing, an unshaken certainty that she was not truly alone. Then the atmosphere shifted. A force, ancient and unnatural, stirred awake. The air grew heavy, thick with an unspoken presence. The drapes by her window billowed unnaturally, their movements dictated not by the wind, but by something far more sinister. A shadow took form behind the fabric, indistinct yet undeniably watching. A presence that had waited in silence, now answering the call. Ellen's breath quickened. A strange sensation crept over her, wrapping around her body like unseen chains. Her muscles stiffened, her vision blurred, and then her body convulsed. She wasn't in control anymore. She had given herself over, and something had accepted. Now, in Germany, 1838, Ellen had built a quiet life with her husband, Thomas Hutter, in Wisborg. Their love was deep, but an unease settled over her when he announced his new assignment, selling an old castle owned by the elusive Count Orlok. Her dread wasn't without reason. On their wedding night, she had dreamt of a doomed celebration, where Death himself stood as her groom. Yet, in that darkness, she had felt an inexplicable peace. Despite her warnings, Thomas set off, leaving Ellen in the care of their friends, Friedrich and Anna Harding, whose home was filled with warmth and the laughter of their children. But as he rode away, the weight of her dream remained, a quiet omen waiting to take shape. As Thomas journeyed toward the castle, he stopped for the night in a remote Bohemian village. The air shifted when the locals heard his business involved the Count. Fear flickered in their eyes, and they urged him to leave. But when he doubled their price, they relented. That night, through his window, Thomas witnessed a chilling ritual. Villagers leading a naked woman into the woods, gathering around a sarcophagus. A creature lay within, lifeless yet ominous, until they drove a stake through its heart. The sight unsettled him, but at dawn he pressed on. Alone in the dense forest, he soon heard the distant clatter of hooves. A carriage emerged from the mist, wordless and waiting. It carried him through the twisting mountain roads, finally stopping before the looming castle. Inside, Count Orlok greeted him from the shadows, his presence eerie and consuming. He insisted Thomas address him as my lord before discussing the sale. As Thomas handled the paperwork, a slip of the hand drew blood. The Count's reaction was instant. His eyes darkened, and before Thomas could react, Orlok fed. Then, the Count's gaze fell upon something else. A locket. Inside, a picture of Ellen. Recognition flickered in his expression. She was no stranger to him. Thomas grew weaker under Orlok's control, trapped in the castle. That night, while unconscious, the Count fed from his chest. But as dawn approached, Thomas discovered the truth. Orlok, lying still within his sarcophagus, was a creature of the night, a vampire. Desperate, Thomas seized a pickaxe, aiming for the monster's heart. But before the blow could land, Orlok's eyes snapped open. The chase began. Hounds at his heels, Thomas fled, clambering through the castle's heights. With no escape left, he leaped from a ledge into the river below, letting the current carry him far from the nightmare that had begun. Ellen's peace unraveled as she wandered through town with Friedrich and Anna. A sudden violent seizure overtook her, her body trembling under an unseen force. The episodes grew worse, leaving her frail and bedridden. Thomas's absence weighed heavily on her, an unspoken dread tightening its grip. Dr. Wilhelm Sievers was summoned, a man devoted to modern medicine. He diagnosed her with an excess of blood, convinced her affliction was physical, not supernatural. But Ellen's suffering ran deeper than the body. It was something far older, far darker. Meanwhile, Thomas, battered and weak, was found and taken to a nearby church for care. But even in his dazed state, he knew the truth. Orlok was coming for Ellen. Ignoring his injuries, he pushed himself homeward. Desperate for answers, Sievers sought his mentor, Dr. Albin Eberhard von Franz, an expert in the occult. Together, they visited Hernach, now locked away in an asylum, his mind shattered. Around him, headless pigeons littered the floor. As they watched in horror, he lifted another to his lips and bit down. Through bloodied teeth, He muttered a chilling warning. His master was coming. Von Franz pieced the horrors together. Orlok, Nosferatu, had marked Ellen, controlling her from afar. While Friedrich dismissed such notions, von Franz needed no more proof. Visiting Ellen in her darkened room, he listened as she spoke, her voice distant, haunted. Orlok's presence had tainted her mind and dreams for as long as she could remember. His arrival was inevitable. Then, as her weary eyes met von Franz's, she asked the question that had plagued her since childhood. Does evil come from within or from beyond? Hidden away in crates filled with the cursed earth of his homeland, Orlok made his passage across the sea. Plague-ridden rats scurried around him, harbingers of death. For days, the ship drifted under an eerie stillness until the slaughter began. One by one, the crew vanished, their bodies drained and discarded. When the vessel finally reached Wisborg, it arrived as a ghost ship, crashing into the harbor with no living soul left aboard. Meanwhile, Thomas fought his way home, desperate to reach Ellen. But something was wrong. Her voice greeted him, yet the words were not her own. Orlok spoke through her, mocking, taunting. She was slipping further into his grasp. In the shadows, the Count had already arrived in Wisborg, guided by the deranged and newly freed Nock. Orlok took refuge in his new dwelling, his presence polluting the town like a spreading disease. But his work was not yet complete. Ellen had to choose him. Without her willing submission, his hold would never be absolute. And so, he waited. As Wisborg slept, Orlok slithered into Ellen's dreams. She saw him now for what he was, a monster. When she refused him, he gave her 3 nights to surrender. If she didn't, he would razz her world to the ground. She woke to horror. Anna, motionless on the floor, rats crawling over her. The plague spread through Wisborg, sickness and death creeping into every corner. Orlok tightened his grip, whispering into Ellen's mind, urging her to turn from Thomas. But she defied him, choosing passion over fear, reclaiming Thomas in the only way she could. That night, Anna awoke to her daughter's screams. She ran to them. Too late. Orlok fed from their small, lifeless bodies before turning to her. By dawn, she and her unborn child were gone. Grief shattered Friedrich. He kissed his dead wife one last time, welcoming the disease that took her. When von Franz and Sievers found them, they burned the bodies. A final act of mercy. But the true horror was still unfolding. Orlok's time had not yet run out. Ellen and von Franz come to a grim conclusion. Orlok can only be stopped if she willingly surrenders herself. To buy time, von Franz leads Thomas and Sievers on a supposed hunt for the vampire. They storm Orlok's manor, prying open his sarcophagus, only to find Nock inside. Wounded and bitter, Nock admits the awful truth. Orlok never intended to share his power. Ellen was all he ever wanted. Realizing the trap, Thomas abandons the hunt and races back to Ellen. Behind him, flames rise as von Franz burns the manor to the ground, but the true battle is yet to come. Orlok comes to Ellen's room, drawn by her surrender. She repledges herself to him, letting him hold her, his fangs sinking into her skin as the night stretches on. But as dawn breaks, his triumph turns to horror. He has been deceived. A strangled scream escapes him as his body begins to wither, drained by the very sacrifice he sought. Ellen clings to him, her own life fading with his. Thomas arrives just in time to gather her in his arms, watching helplessly as she slips away. He holds her, grief-stricken, as the morning sun washes over them. Von Franz's voice carries over the quiet, solemn in its truth. Ellen's sacrifice had saved them all. The town was free. The nightmare of Nosferatu had ended. And so, as the first light of dawn spills across the cursed town of Wisborg, the reign of Count Orlok comes to a tragic end. Ellen's sacrifice was not just an act of love, but a final stand against the darkness that had haunted her since childhood. In the end, Nosferatu, the embodiment of death itself, was outwitted by the very thing he sought to claim. But was he truly destroyed? Or does his shadow still linger, waiting to return? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like and subscribe for more haunting tales. Until next time, stay in the light.